You can't pour from an empty cup. And yet so many of us try every single day. We wake up already drained, already carrying the weight of yesterday's burdens. And then we step into a world that demands even more of us. We show up for jobs that don't see our true worth, for families that depend on us, for friends that expect us to be the strong one. And we think that if we just keep giving, somehow everything will work itself out. But the truth is, when you're running on fumes, when your soul is depleted, when your heart is cracked and bleeding, but you keep pretending you're fine, you're not helping anyone, you're hurting yourself, and in the process, you're giving people the weakest version of you. We've been conditioned to believe that selflessness is the highest form of love, that strength is measured by how much you can carry, how much you can endure without breaking. But strength isn't about how much weight you can hold. It's about knowing when to set it down. It's about realizing that you can't water someone else's garden if your own well is dry. You can't heal a child's pain when you've never faced your own. You can't offer wisdom to a friend when your mind is clouded by unresolved battles. You can't be a light in the dark if you've allowed your own flame to burn out. Some of us have gotten so used to running on empty that we've forgotten what it feels like to be full of peace, full of joy, full of clarity. We confuse motion with progress. We keep moving, keep running, keep giving, but never stopping long enough to refill. And then when the breaking point comes, when the exhaustion hits, when the tears won't stop, when the body finally collapses under the pressure, we call it weakness. No, it's not weakness. It's a warning. It's your soul's way of telling you that you cannot keep ignoring yourself and expect to survive. Fixing yourself first doesn't mean you love people any less. It doesn't mean you've abandoned them. It means you love them enough to want to give them the best version of you, not the broken fragments. It means you respect them too much to hand them pieces of yourself that aren't whole. It means you want your love to heal, not to harm. When you put yourself last every time, when you consistently choose to patch up everyone else while you bleed inside, you're teaching the world that your needs don't matter. And eventually, that lesson seeps into your own heart until you start believing it too. You matter. Your healing matters. Your peace matters. Your rest matters. And no matter how urgent everything else feels, nothing will ever be more important than you becoming whole. Because when you're whole, your love is pure. When you're whole, your wisdom is sharp. When you're whole, your presence doesn't just fill a space, it transforms it. I know it feels selfish to pause. I know it feels uncomfortable to say no. I know it feels heavy to admit that you need help, that you're tired, that you're not as strong as you've been pretending to be. But there is nothing selfish about survival. There is nothing weak about restoration. And there is nothing wrong with saying, I need to fix me before I can help you. That's not abandonment. That's preparation. That's you building the strength to carry what's yours without being destroyed by what isn't. Some of you are carrying battles that were never even yours to fight. You're holding wounds that didn't start with you, but have lived in your family for generations. You're trying to break cycles without ever letting yourself heal from the scars. But you can't rewrite the story if you're still bleeding on the pages. You can't create a new legacy from a broken place. You've got to be brave enough to stop, to step back, to admit that your cup is empty, and then take the time to fill it again. And when you do, everything changes. You start showing up for people with joy instead of resentment. You start making decisions out of clarity instead of confusion. You stop letting guilt drive you and start letting peace lead you. When your cup is full, you don't just give, you overflow. And that overflow is what blesses the people around you. So, no, fixing yourself first is not selfish. It's necessary. It's sacred. It's survival. You can't pour from an empty cup. Fill yours first. Everything else can wait. The noise around you will always be loud. Life has a way of crowding in with demands that feel urgent. Voices that sound convincing and distractions that seem endless. From the moment you open your eyes in the morning, something is already pulling at you. Emails, responsibilities, family, friends, even the weight of your own thoughts. It can feel like you're living in a constant storm of sound where everything is telling you what you should do, where you should go, who you should be. And if you're not careful, you'll spend your whole life listening to everything but yourself. The noise doesn't just come from the outside. It lives inside too. That whisper of doubt that tells you you're not enough. That echo of failure reminding you of the times you fell short. That comparison that creeps in when you look at someone else's journey and start measuring your worth against theirs. The noise is everywhere. And the hardest part about it is that it never stops. The moment you silence one voice, another rises up to take its place. And if you're waiting for life to get quiet before you focus on yourself, you'll be waiting forever. That's why you've got to learn to turn down the volume on the world and turn up the volume on your soul. Because the truth is the noise will never stop, but you can choose not to be ruled by it. You can choose to pause. You can choose to step away. You can choose to recognize that not every demand is urgent. Not every request deserves an answer. Not every opinion has the right to shape who you are. Sometimes we confuse noise with importance. Just because it's loud doesn't mean it's worthy of your attention. Just because it's persistent doesn't mean it's purposeful. There are people who will always want something from you, circumstances that will always demand more, situations that will always seem like emergencies. But the loudest thing in your life isn't always the most important thing. Sometimes the quietest voice, the one inside you that's whispering peace, whispering healing, whispering growth, is the one that matters most. And yet so many of us ignore that voice because we've been conditioned to respond to the noise. We're taught to answer every call, to react to every situation, to keep moving no matter what. We live in a culture that glorifies business, where being overwhelmed is worn like a badge of honor and exhaustion is mistaken for dedication. But if the cost of meeting every demand is losing yourself, then it's too expensive. You don't have to drown in the chaos just because it's loud. You don't have to carry every weight just because someone dropped it at your feet. You don't have to chase every expectation just because it was spoken over your life. When you begin to silence the noise, you start to realize that a lot of what's screaming for your attention doesn't deserve your energy. It takes courage to step back. It takes courage to say no. It takes courage to let the world keep spinning while you sit still long enough to hear yourself again. But that's where healing starts, in the stillness, not in the noise. That's where clarity comes, in the pause, not in the rush. That's where strength is built, in the quiet, not in the chaos. If you don't learn how to quiet the noise, it will drain you before you ever reach your purpose. Because the noise has a way of convincing you that you're behind, that you're not doing enough, that you're missing opportunities, that you're failing. But let me tell you something, the noise lies. The noise thrives on your exhaustion, on your fear, on your constant movement. The noise wants you so busy responding to life that you never stop long enough to actually live it. When you shut it down, when you set boundaries, when you stop running to every call, when you give yourself permission to breathe, you begin to see that peace was there all along. Purpose was there all along. Healing was there all along. But you couldn't hear it because the noise was too loud. So don't wait for the world to get quiet. Don't wait for the demands to end. Don't wait for the chaos to settle. Learn to quiet it yourself. Learn to choose peace over pressure. Learn to listen to the voice within, even when the voices around you are screaming, because the noise will always be there, but your peace is more important than the volume of the world. Brokenness breeds brokenness, and that's something we don't like to admit. We convince ourselves that we can push past our pain, hide our wounds, and still show up whole. We tell ourselves that if we just smile wide enough, work hard enough, love deeply enough, no one will notice the fractures beneath the surface. But brokenness has a way of leaking out, whether you want it to or not. You may cover it with success, disguise it with kindness, or mask it with strength. But eventually what's unresolved in you will reveal itself in how you love, how you lead, and how you live. You can't nurture a child from a place of unhealed trauma without some of that trauma slipping into the way you speak to them. You can't build a relationship on top of abandonment wounds without those fears showing up in your trust. Your arguments, your expectations. You can't chase a dream without dealing with your self-doubt. Because every time an opportunity comes, you'll second guess whether you're good enough to take it. Unhealed places don't disappear, they multiply. And before you know it, you're spreading the same pain you were trying so hard to protect others from. We often think brokenness is invisible, but people feel it. They may not always be able to name it, but they sense it in the way you react, in the way you pull back, in the way you demand, or the way you retreat. Pain has fingerprints, and when you haven't dealt with it, you start leaving those prints on everything you touch. That's why healing isn't just about you. It's about everyone connected to you. Because the broken pieces of your life don't stay with you. They cut the people closest to you too. The hard part is that many of us grew up watching brokenness pass from one generation to the next. We watched our parents struggle with wounds they never talked about. We saw families torn apart by silence, by secrets, by cycles that no one dared to interrupt. And now we find ourselves carrying the weight of that same brokenness, trying to build new lives while dragging old chains. But until you decide to fix what's inside you, those chains will keep rattling in every relationship you try to hold together. It's not about blame. It's not about pointing fingers at who hurt you, who abandoned you, who lied to you. It's about recognizing that healing is your responsibility, even if the pain wasn't your fault. Because if you don't deal with it, you will repeat it. If you don't confront it, you will project it. If you don't fix it, you will pass it on. And the last thing you want is to look at the people you love and realize they are carrying wounds that began with you. Healing requires honesty. It requires you to admit that the mask you wear is heavy, that the laughter you use to cover your pain is exhausting, that the strength you project is sometimes a performance. It requires you to sit with yourself long enough to face the parts you'd rather avoid, the disappointment, the anger, the fear. And I know that's uncomfortable. I know it feels easier to keep moving, to keep giving, to keep pretending, but you can't conquer what you refuse to confront. When you begin to heal, the way you love changes. You no longer love out of fear of being abandoned. You love from a place of security. You no longer control people out of fear of losing them. You release them with trust. You no longer tear yourself down before others can. You stand tall in the worth you've discovered. Healing transforms not just how you feel about yourself, but how you show up in every single space of your life. And here's the beautiful thing, wholeness is contagious too. Just as brokenness spreads, so does healing. When you fix yourself, you show others what's possible. You break cycles that looked unbreakable. You become a safe place for people who have never known safety. You love in a way that doesn't drain but restores. Your wholeness becomes an inheritance for everyone connected to you. So yes, brokenness breeds brokenness. But healing breeds healing too. You get to decide which one you pass on. And the choice begins the moment you decide to face your wounds, to stop hiding your pain, and to fix yourself before the brokenness has a chance to multiply. Pause is not failure, though the world will try to make you believe it is. We live in a culture that glorifies the hustle, that celebrates the grind, that claps for exhaustion as though it were a medal of honor. We've been taught that the only way to succeed is to never stop moving, never stop working, never stop giving. And so we push ourselves past our limits, measuring our worth by how tired we are, how much we've accomplished, how little time we have left for ourselves. But the truth is, constantly running doesn't make you strong. It makes you empty. And sometimes the bravest, most powerful thing you can do is stop. Stopping doesn't mean you've quit. Pausing doesn't mean you're weak. Resting doesn't mean you've fallen behind. It simply means you're wise enough to recognize that you cannot carry everything, do everything, be everything without taking time to breathe. Even nature understands the necessity of pause. Seasons change, trees shed leaves, the earth itself goes through cycles of rest before producing again. Yet somehow we think we can outwork the very rhythms that creation is built on. We think we can keep giving without restoring, keep building without repairing, keep pouring without refilling. But a life without pause eventually collapses under the weight of constant movement. Sometimes the most sacred progress is invisible. It's in the pause where the healing takes place. It's in the stillness where clarity is born. It's in the quiet moments when you step away from the chaos that your soul begins to mend. Pausing gives your mind the space to process, your body the space to recover, and your spirit the space to reconnect with what truly matters. Without that, you're not moving forward. You're just moving in circles, mistaking business for purpose. But I know how it feels to be terrified of stopping. I know the fear that creeps in when you think that if you slow down, the world will pass you by. That if you step back, someone else will take your place. That if you rest, everything you've been working for will fall apart. But what if the opposite is true? What if by never stopping, you're actually losing more than you realize? What if you're giving away the best parts of yourself to exhaustion, to stress, to constant demands? What if the very thing you're afraid of missing out on is waiting for you in the pause? Rest is not a luxury, it's a necessity. You were not designed to burn yourself out just to prove you're worthy. You were not created to live in constant motion, never allowing yourself a moment to simply be. Sometimes your greatest strength is not in pressing forward, but in having the courage to stop, to sit, to breathe, and to say, I need this moment for me. Because when you come back from that pause, you come back stronger, sharper, clearer. You come back ready to build with purpose instead of desperation. You come back ready to love with fullness instead of frustration. And let me tell you something, everything will not fall apart just because you stop for a moment. The world will not end if you take a step back. The people who truly value you will understand, and the responsibilities meant for you will wait. What you will discover is that in the pause, what doesn't belong to you falls away, and what is truly yours remains. That is the gift of stillness. It reveals what is real and what is noise. When you honor the pause, you honor yourself. You give yourself permission to heal, to breathe, to rebuild. You stop living like a machine and start living like a human being. You stop defining your worth by how much you produce and start recognizing the value of who you are. And when you do that, everything around you shifts. Your relationships become healthier because you're no longer giving from emptiness. Your dreams become clearer because you're no longer rushing without vision. Your life becomes richer because you've learned that stillness can carry just as much power as motion. So don't let anyone convince you that pausing makes you weak. Don't let the world trick you into thinking that if you rest, you're failing. Sometimes pausing is the most courageous choice you can make. Sometimes it's the very thing that saves you from collapsing under the weight of your own business. And sometimes the pause is not the setback. It's the preparation, alignment over approval. That's a lesson many of us learned the hard way. For too long, we've lived under the weight of other people's opinions. We've allowed their expectations to shape our decisions, their applause to determine our worth, and their acceptance to dictate our direction. We chase validation like it's the air we breathe, convincing ourselves that if enough people clap for us, if enough people like us, if enough people choose us, then somehow we'll finally feel whole. But here's the truth, approval is fleeting, but alignment is forever. When you build your life on approval, you're building on shaky ground. People change. Opinions shift. The same voices that cheer for you today can turn into the voices that criticize you tomorrow. And if your identity is rooted in their validation, you'll constantly be rebuilding yourself every time their opinion changes. That's why some of us feel exhausted, not because we're working too hard, But because we're living lives that were never truly ours, we've been bending, shrinking, performing, and molding ourselves into shapes that don't fit just to be accepted. But acceptance built on pretending isn't real, it's fragile, and it will always leave you empty. Aligning, on the other hand, is different. Alignment is when your choices, your values, your actions, and your spirit are all moving in the same direction. Alignment is when you stop asking, do they approve of me? And start asking, am I at peace with me? Alignment is freedom. It's the place where your yes means yes and your no means no, not because you're trying to please anyone, but because you've learned to honor what is right for your soul. Some of us are living in conflict because we're chasing approval in spaces where we were never meant to belong. We're trying to earn seats at tables that were never built for us, fighting for acceptance from people who wouldn't recognize our worth, even if we handed it to them. And the more we chase it, the more we lose ourselves. Because every time you choose approval over alignment, you silence your own voice a little more. You dismiss your own calling a little more. You step out of your purpose a little more until one day you wake up and realize you don't even know who you are anymore. You only know who they wanted you to be. But when you choose alignment, something shifts. You stop begging for permission to exist. You stop shrinking yourself to fit into spaces too small for your spirit. You stop apologizing for being who you are. And in that space, you discover a kind of confidence that doesn't need applause to survive. Because applause can fade, but peace remains. Approval can vanish, but purpose is steady. And when you're aligned, you don't have to chase opportunities. Opportunities start chasing you because wholeness attracts what belongs to it. It's not easy to walk away from the need for approval. I know it feels lonely at first. I know it feels uncomfortable to set boundaries, to say no, to choose the path that makes sense for you, but confuses everyone else. I know it feels risky to release the validation you've depended on for so long, but I promise you this, the peace you gain in alignment is worth more than the approval you lose in the process. Because the truth is, not everyone will clap for you when you start walking in purpose. Some people will criticize, some will misunderstand, some will even walk away. And that's okay. Because the ones who are meant to walk with you will not need you to shrink to be loved. They will not demand that you betray yourself to be accepted. They will celebrate you in your fullness, not your fragments. Living in alignment requires courage. It requires you to trust yourself even when others doubt you. It requires you to choose purpose over popularity. It requires you to believe that peace is worth more than applause. And when you make that choice, you begin to build a life that can't be shaken by changing opinions. You begin to live with a freedom that doesn't require constant explanation. You begin to realize that the approval you were chasing was never the prize. Alignment was. So don't trade your peace for people's applause. Don't trade your authenticity for their acceptance. Don't trade your purpose for their comfort. Because at the end of the day, approval fades, but alignment will carry you into everything you were created to be. Wholeness attracts wholeness. And that's why the work you do on yourself is never wasted. So many of us spend years trying to fix what's around us, trying to repair broken relationships, trying to hold families together, trying to build careers, trying to chase dreams, without ever realizing that the condition of those things often mirrors the condition of our own hearts. When you're whole, you see the world differently. You don't approach people from desperation. You approach them from strength. You don't chase opportunities out of fear of lack. You step into them with confidence that what's meant for you will not miss you. Your wholeness doesn't just heal you. It has a way of spilling over and transforming everything connected to you. There is something magnetic about a person who has done the work to heal. You can feel it when they walk into a room. They don't have to beg for attention. They don't have to fight for love. They don't have to manipulate their way into opportunities. Their presence carries a peace that speaks louder than any performance ever could. Wholeness draws in people who are ready to love differently, think differently, and live differently, because what you carry sets the tone for what you attract. Brokenness pulls in more brokenness, but wholeness calls forth wholeness. The challenge is that too many of us are trying to build connections from a place of emptiness. We want love, but we haven't learned to love ourselves. We want trust, but we haven't confronted the betrayals we still carry. We want joy, but we haven't released the bitterness that keeps joy from taking root. And when we wonder why our relationships feel heavy, why our dreams keep stalling, why our peace is always slipping through our fingers, the answer is often that we're trying to create something whole from a place that's still fractured. Wholeness doesn't mean you're perfect. It doesn't mean you never struggle or never fall. It means you've faced your pain and chosen healing over hiding. It means you've looked at your wounds and decided not to let them define your future. It means you've made peace with who you are, flaws and all, and in that acceptance, you've created space for real growth. Wholeness is not about never being broken. It's about not staying broken. When you walk in that kind of wholeness, you change the way you connect. Relationships become partnerships instead of rescues. You stop trying to fix people and start empowering them. You stop settling for love that drains you and start attracting love that matches you. You stop clinging to spaces that don't value you and start walking boldly into places that honor you. Because when you're whole, you don't chase what was never meant to be yours. You recognize your worth and trust that what belongs to you will align with it. This is why the work on yourself cannot wait. Because your wholeness doesn't just impact you. It impacts your family, your friendships, your calling, your future. When you're whole, your children inherit peace instead of trauma. When you're whole, your relationships inherit stability instead of chaos. When you're whole, your work inherits clarity instead of confusion. Every part of your life feels the shift when you decide that you will no longer live in fragments. And let me be clear, it's not easy. Choosing wholeness means letting go of familiar pain. It means setting boundaries with people who benefited from your brokenness. It means walking away from cycles that felt comfortable but kept you trapped. It means choosing healing when hiding would be easier. It's hard, but it's worth it, because what you gain in wholeness cannot be replaced by anything temporary you lose along the way. The beauty of wholeness is that it doesn't just stop with you. Just like brokenness spreads, wholeness does too. When you heal, you become a safe place for others to heal. When you walk in peace, you give others permission to pursue peace. When you choose wholeness, you show others that it's possible for them too. Your wholeness becomes a light in dark places, a testimony that broken beginnings can still lead to whole endings. So don't rush past the work of fixing yourself. Don't think it's selfish to step back, to pause, to heal, to align. Because everything you're longing for, love, peace, clarity, purpose, it all flows from the state of your heart. And when your heart is whole, the life connected to it begins to flourish in ways you never imagined.